Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Incredible Hulk number 390, cover dated February 1992. This is a really eye-catching cover featuring the Hulk doing his best impression of Arnold Schwarzenegger crossed with Sylvester Stallone. It's by Dale Keown, inked by Mark Farmer. Really excellent piece with the Hulk there, blasting away with that machine gun and a real look of rage on his face as well. Now this is part one of three, a War and Pieces storyline, but it's also interestingly a crossover with X Factor. So Peter David is the author of this issue, and at this time period he was also the writer on X Factor. So naturally enough, why not have a crossover between the two titles? And this is what we're getting, and this in effect is more or less part one of that crossover. So let's open this one up to the splash page. The story begins in medias res, that is in the middle of things, in Trans-Sabal. It's a civilized country, declares the third person narration. It has a long and distinguished history. Poets and prophets alike have risen from its people and made a difference in the world. In recent years, however, Trans-Sabal has fallen upon difficult times. The few are happy and the many starve. The many have not taken well to that. The few have fought back. Lines have been drawn and trespassed. And in the words of a prophet of far more recent vintage, of course you realize, and we can fill out the rest of the quotation, this means war. But interesting splash page here. Lots of action there. Really good work from Dale Keown showing the treads of these tanks being blasted to pieces by whatever is being fired at them here. It's really good stuff. Nice red background there. The colorist is Glynis Oliver, and a trope of hers is when there's a moment of violence, she'll color in the background red. So arresting stuff, beginning the story in the middle of things with plenty of action. Turn the page and we get a really great double page spread from Dale Keown. There we go. That's the title of the story. This means war. And we have these mandroids, and you can see Dale Keown enjoying himself, likely creating updated designs for the mandroids. And the creative team down here: Peter David, writer; Dale Keown, penciler; Mark Farmer, inker; Joe Rosen, letterer; and Glynis Oliver, colour. So a really great creative team there. And the mandroids, whoever's in them, we'll find out shortly. They're enjoying their superior violent advantage on the field of battle. Good work. God, I love this job, says one of them, the team leader. So who is it that they are battling there? Let's turn the page and we will get a little bit more light shed on the whole situation. Well, it turns out they're fighting foot soldiers of the Pantheon organization that the Hulk is now allied to. And in this era of the Hulk's story continuity, all of the Hulk's different personalities have merged. That's the personality of the Savage Hulk, the personality of the Grey Hulk, and Bruce Banner himself. And this particular persona is known as the Professor. In any case, one of the Pantheon foot soldiers has found himself pinned to the ground. He's imagining his legs are crushed. A huge weapon has fallen on top of him, and his teammates there are trying to remove it as the mandroids close in. We've got no choice. We have to survive until reinforcements arrive, says one of them. They said anytime there's going to be, and the guy who's pinned to the ground says there's going to be squat. The Pantheon sent us out here to die, man. They've forgotten all about us. They don't care. We're dead. We're all dead. And then bottom panel here, we get a nice rear end shot of this huge hulking figure. Of course it is the Hulk. Interesting use of screen tone there as well by Mark Farmer. Not yet, he says. Let's turn the page. And interesting just device here of keeping the Hulk, like a full picture of the Hulk, out of our view until after all of these panels pass. So he removes the heavy weapon that was pinning the guy to the ground. He finds the trigger in the weapon, that it's still working. Automated target sight. Very nice, he says. Excuse me a moment, won't you? And he... well, what's happening here is actually the scene switches to one of the mandroids blasting away at this armored unit, in which is one of the Pantheon members, one of the ones that we've been following in previous issues of Incredible Hulk. It is Hector. And the man in the mandroid recognized him. Don't worry, unit leader, he's not putting up any resistance. And then someone behind him says, I think you should know that I find the prospect of littering the landscape with you very distasteful. You're just grunts after all, so believe my sincerity when I say to you, let's turn the page, we're going to get a big full page image of the Hulk. Let us reason together, he says. And weirdly and oddly, but we'll get an explanation for it later, he's wearing pink bunny slippers, which kind of undercuts the coolness of the image of him carrying those huge guns. I mean, this is the era of Rob Liefeld's Cable as well. So Peter David and Dale Keown leaning into that, its popularity, and definitely probably pulling some teenage boy readers for this particular version of the Hulk. Really good artwork on the page though. I do like Dale Keown's design of this iteration of the Hulk. So we're going to get some action. The mandroids start blasting at the Hulk, but of course he's unfazed. He says here, all right, I tried to be reasonable. As I said, you're just grunts, but you had your chance. At some point you have to be accountable for your actions, and besides, your pulse cannons ruined my bunny slippers, he says, as he narrows his eyes there. And then let's rip with this massive phallic gun that he's toting there. Choom, it goes as it blasts away. I don't think the phallic nature of the gun is accidental either, but in any case, it really does some damage to those mandroids. And here are the people who are operating them, not Americans, Arabs. The Farnock said this would be easy, that the rebels couldn't cope with this American technology. He's not paying me enough for this. So Rick Jones is there on the battlefield too, and he uses some smelling salts to wake Hector up. And there's a little bit of joking here because it's Peter David scripted, so there's got to be some jokes and movie references. So Hector's confused. Dick Jones. Rick holds out his hand. Rick, actually, but I prefer Indiana. We named the dog Indiana. This is coming just not too long after Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, in which we get that joke delivered by Sean Connery. And here we go with Rick helping Hector up. And Hector's asking, is this really the time for jokes and movie references? Actually, no. Way too much heat flying. Let's blow this popsicle stand, says Rick. And let's see how the Hulk is getting on. So he's blasting away, but he runs out of ammunition. And then he switches to the smaller gun, the chain gun here, firing away at those mandroids. That's a really excellent anchor image, and that's the inspiration for our cover, of course. Hasta la vista, baby, he says, quoting Arnold Schwarzenegger from Terminator 2. And then the scene switches to Farnock Dan's palace. So Trans-Sabal is a fictional country in the Arabian Peninsula. It's supposed to border Saudi Arabia and Yemen to the south, and also have beachfront along the Red Sea, facing Eritrea on the other side of the Red Sea. So Farnock Dan is the leader. He is like, he's kind of, in a sense, a type of Saudi prince, let's say, with his own principality. So he's here entertaining a couple of Western guests, and it all has to do with what this woman calls some sort of unpleasantness with your locals. And the Farnock, that's his title, says, merely some troublemakers, madame. There are always troublemakers, but with the help and support we're receiving from the United States, I don't anticipate difficulties continuing much longer. Do you, Mr. Galvin? So Mr. Galvin is a CIA man, and he says, oh, not much longer at all, Farnock. And then he's having difficulty eating his dinner there. So the conversation continues between the Farnock and the woman, where he says about Mr. Galvin that he's with one of those many American agencies with letters for names not important, the CIA. You know, I'll be almost sorry when this unpleasantness is ended, he says. Chatting with Mr. Galvin, I've acquired new appreciation for the American view of things. This democracy, such a fascinating concept, isn't it? He says. And he continues, because he likes the sound of his own voice. Why, in return for American aid, I promised as Trans-Sabal's ruler to institute democratic reforms here. Mr. Galvin has been most instructive in that philosophy. So Galvin, he's just making progress with his dinner there as the Farnock whaps him on the back, and out goes the food and down on top of Mr. Galvin's suit. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," he says. He's not at all sincere. So Galvin walks off to get himself cleaned up, and as he walks away, he calls the Farnock a jerk. I like that. And then his PA comes out, Penfold. "We've just gotten a report from the field. There's a new problem, a large one." That's a really good shot of Galvin's face there by Dale Keown. It's good stuff. So then we're back out on the battlefield. The very large problem is the Hulk. This is a really nice panel here as he's blasting away at those mandroids and making progress against them. And yeah, it's good stuff. It's good fight choreography from Dale Keown. I imagine he really enjoyed this. This is a really nice anchor image here of the Hulk leaping towards these mandroids and yelling, "Hulk smash, my green butt, I'm going to kill somebody." And look again at the red background here from Glynis Oliver in the colours. So he smashes into the mandroids. Action, action, action. Another great action page here as he's punching away and ripping open those mandroids, smashing them together. "Hey, bully boy," he yells. "We've seen how tough I am without my weapons. How's about you?" So he rips off the front of the mandroid and he sees the mighty pasty-faced boy within. "Puny, that is. You ought to get out more," he jokes. And then he's blasted from behind, overconfident. So he says to the guy who blasted him, "2 points for you, that stung. This will do more than sting." And then one of the chief Pantheon members, Ulysses, arrives finally and slices off the muzzle of the mandroid's hand-mounted cannon there. So great action here, great upshot on the Hulk as he's shot in the back. Really, really good stuff. More action here as Ulysses, but this a moment of true violence as Ulysses stabs the human operating the mandroid through the armor, and Hulk here is aghast. "For pity's sake, Ulysses," he says, "you stabbed him to death right through the robot body." And Ulysses has a very hard-nosed response. "So, what happened to Hulk smash, my green butt? I'm going to kill somebody." Hulk says, "I was kidding," and I wasn't, says Ulysses. "This isn't a dog and pony show, Doctor. They tried to kill us, we tried to kill them. That's how this works. I thought you understood that. So it's war, and it's kill or be killed." So we're moved out and away from the tropes and conventions of Silver Age superhero comics in this regard. And Rick here is helping Hector along, and Rick does some investigation of the mandroid robot armor. "I knew it," he says. "They're new and improved, but they're still mandroids. This is SHIELD armament." And then he wonders rhetorically, "Oh man, what's Bruce gotten me into the middle of? That day they brought me to the Mount. I didn't think that. Well, maybe I didn't think at all." And then we flash back. And of course, the convention for a flashback in the 1980s in particular is the curved edges of panel borders. So we started in the middle of things, but here we get what happened before in this non-linear narrative. So this is what happened before. We're flashing back. So Rick has been brought to the Mount, which is the base, the Pantheon's base, and he finds the Hulk studying, and he pretends to be taken by surprise. "I'm sorry to have disturbed you. I'll leave you quietly," that he doesn't recognize the Hulk. Really like the shadow cast there, the lighting on the Hulk shed from the lamp here, and just the shadow of the rim of his spectacles going back on the side of his head. That's great detail. That's really good stuff by Keown and Farmer. So the Hulk here, like I said, he's no longer savage. He's no longer brainless. Turns around. That's a very human looking Hulk. "Rick, what are you talking about?" he asks. Rick here pretends that, continues the pretense that he doesn't recognize him. And Hulk explains, "I feel more comfortable reading with the glasses on. What can I say?" But of course, the Hulk doesn't have eyesight problems like Bruce Banner would. So it's all an affectation. "Glad you could make it." And then Rick says, "Well, when a couple of guys in the Pantheon jumpsuits show up at my door saying you want to see me, it's hard to resist." "Nice digs," he says. "No wonder you stopped hanging out at my apartment." Oh, this is from Betty. So at this time, Bruce Banner and Betty Ross Banner are married but separated. not divorced. And Bruce is wondering whether they might get back together again. So Betty sent him a gift, and it turns out to be these big fluffy pink slippers that we saw in that big anchor image a few pages earlier. So now we know where they came from. And Rick here seeing a book on Bruce's desk, How to Please a Woman and Make Her Beg for More. So it's kind of really indicating that these two, that the married but separated couple, are really keen to get back together. So in any case, another joke here, Bruce saying, I didn't know bunny slippers came in size 20. This is really interesting. Teeny tiny panel here, and a small again as well, super small figures. Interesting, choice of layout here from Dale Keown. Obviously there's no scope for action on these pages, so intriguing the way that he's telling the story and the choices he's making with the images. So the Hulk says to Rick, thank her for me, and then he gets to business, why he's asked Rick to come to the Mount. I want to show you something. This burn ward is one of the reasons I joined the Pantheon, he says. Tomorrow a squad of us is moving in to aid Pantheon troops already fighting these people's oppressive government. So now we're on the other side of Farnock Dan with the rebels, yes? You mean their own leaders did this to them? This and more, says the Hulk. I was hoping you might be interested in joining us in our little throw the bum out party. You're smart, savvy, you've learned battle tactics from the best. That's Captain America the Hulk is referring to. And besides, in the words of Sherlock Holmes, I would be lost without my Boswell. So he's mixing up things there. It's Samuel Johnson who had Boswell as his sidekick amanuensis secretary. Thanks, Bruce. I appreciate that. And hey, if I can help ace the creep who treated his own people like this, then count me in. And then we transition to the present again as Rick is helping one of the Trans-Sabal soldiers from the destroyed Mandroid suit, but the soldier is dying. He says, I serve the noble Farnock Dan, our ruler anointed by God, and we will kill all those who rise against him. We will fight to the last man. Rick asks him where the equipment come from, but he's dead. Hector says, let's go. He won't tell you anything. And Rick here, regretting coming to Trans-Sabal. Man, I wish I'd asked Betty's advice or something. She always knows what's what. So this is the way that Peter David kind of teed up transitions. So we're going to have a scene shift to precisely Betty. And Betty's got a Veronica that works with her at the helpline hotline. And Veronica's given her a message from Rick Jones's mother. Now Rick's an orphan. So Betty gets upset, thinks it's a practical joke. Veronica here not at all happy about that. Then there's a call coming through on the helpline for Betty, and it is Jacqueline Shore, Rick Jones's mother. So Betty drops her coffee in shock. And then we're back to Trans-Sabal, Mr. Wilson and Farnock Dan, and we're getting news from the battlefield. Mr. Wilson says, you have a problem to the Farnock. You have the problem, my CIA friend, says the tyrant. You said your government would be providing me with SHIELD agents and equipment. I really like this top-down shot here. This is good stuff from Dale Keown. No, we never said that, says Wilson. That equipment, yes, and some people to train your soldiers to operate it. More than that, we cannot do right now. So that's a very interesting comment from Wilson in 2024. You know, you could apply that to things going on at the moment. Between SHIELD's personnel losses and the UN connection now, well, matters are tricky, he says. So the Farnock replies, I don't care how tricky they are. I have assurances from the president's people. Now, who is the president? In 1991, when this story was written, the end of 1991, well, it's George Bush Sr. And he continues, he says, from the CIA, Trans-Sabal aids US energy needs. He's talking about oil. The US aids Trans-Sabal. Let's not lose sight of that. Now, what is this green monster my men were ranting about? So Wilson replies, best guess the Hulk. Excuse me. We knew he'd fallen into... Excuse me. We knew he'd fallen into Pantheon hands. Either they've recruited or brainwashed him, he says. So what? I've 2,000 200,000 troops, even if it is this Hulk, what difference can he make? So Wilson is amused. He says, spoken like someone who doesn't know what he's facing. This does have a major plus, though. And here we go. Here's Peter David kind of referring to US politics a little bit more explicitly towards the very end of the issue. He received a presidential pardon and reciprocated by going on a rampage. That's why the GOP made such a big deal out of Willie Horton. Now, that's a reference to George Bush's a campaign ad, a famous, infamous, notorious campaign ad of George Bush's against Michael Dukakis back in 1988. So Willie Horton there was a murderer that got a release in the state that Dukakis was governor of, and this was used to attack him as part of the presidential competition and campaign. So Peter David making reference to that, obviously writing this story at the end of 1991. It is after the first Gulf War, and he is referring allegorically, like loosely allegorically, to some of the political commentary and disagreement about why the US went to the aid of Kuwait against Iraq. So, you know, it's interesting to think about this way back in 1991, 1992, the marvel of the time, where it was pretty much the case that you wouldn't be allowed to do anything on the nose in terms of political critique or commentary in Marvel Comics versus what's possible today. It's just intriguing. But in any case, back to the story. Wilson continues and says to cloud the issue before the Democrats could focus on the Hulk pardon. So kind of insinuating Marvel characters into the real world political context of the late 80s, early 90s, but from Peter David's perspective. And Peter David, of course, wouldn't have been a supporter of the Republican Party or George Bush Sr. So the story is winding towards the cliffhanger now. I've already informed Washington, and they're sending a special task force to deal with the Hulk, says Wilson. What sort of task force, asks the Farnock, and it is X Factor. We'll have this business wrapped in no time, says Wilson. So we see them aboard this government jet, and we've got Val on the laptop there with her personal coffee mug. We've got Alex just looking out the window, hoping that he's not going to fall out of another plane, that being a signal moment in his life story. Lorna back there reading. And what I love is we've got Strong Guy here in the foreground, and he's doing a little tapestry work, and he's wearing those size 20 pink fluffy bunny slippers as well. So pretty good. Next, Escalation. Letters page here. And that wraps it up. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on the Incredible Hulk number 390. This is more or less part one of a crossover between the Hulk and X Factor, authored entirely by Peter David. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section to the video. If you enjoyed my review, please like the video in YouTube and share it too. It really helps the channel. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.